All right, welcome back. We are live. Everything is rolling. All right, so it's not been the craziest week this week in North Carolina, but there has been, won't say growth necessarily on the attack in Charlotte, but nationwide, the and really internationally, that story has really picked up. But the GOP and Democrats both are silent. Media silence. No one's talking about it. Um, and as you've seen on the title, there was a man who was arrested for posting some comments on a YouTube video. And not only was the threat pretty wild, but how he was arrested is also pretty wild. So I think that's worth taking a look at. Um, and we've got just some other stuff to get into. We will take a look at that Blue Cross Blue Shield thing. I tell you, that is a crazy, crazy web. Talking to some people this week about it, and I wasn't the only one that wasn't quite aware that Blue Cross Blue Shield wasn't only in North Carolina, let alone not only in America. It's been a fascinating dive, and I'm nowhere near truly finished with it. There's so much, and when you think about Blue Cross Blue Shield, almost 100-year-old company, getting very close to it. Lots of money, lots of stuff has happened with that. But if you're new here, I want to say welcome, thank you. I'm Baz. I appreciate you. And without any further ado, let's get into it. You might hear Oscar down here. He helps out with some research. But we'll hop into this first one here. This comes from The Independent via Yahoo News. It says a North Carolina man is facing federal charges over a comment posted online in which he allegedly threatened to shoot up a black preschool, after which the victims would be skinned, according to an FBI probable cause affidavit. The man's name is Zachary Charles Newell, 25. He was arrested Monday on one count of making an interstate threat to kidnap or injure. Now, on Sunday, a cybercrime team at Google flagged a disturbingly violent YouTube comment to the FBI's National Threat Operations Center, the affidavit states. It says the comment had been uploaded to the video sharing site 4 days prior at 10:37 local time by a user with the screen name Commenters Hate Me. It continues with posted beneath a video by YouTuber Andrew Esquire. Commenters Hate Me wrote, "I'm going to shoot up a black preschool. 20 black babies will be shot, then skinned." And it continues on that. It gets pretty graphic, actually. In the video, the YouTuber was discussing a reported Los Angeles police investigation into Raja Jackson, which, if you haven't heard of that, there's some wild stuff that's going on outside of North Carolina. But this Raja Jackson situation that this guy was commenting on over there we go. Quentin Rampage Jackson, who's a MMA fighter. If you watch MMA, you might know who he is. If you don't watch MMA, his son does live streaming. And long story short, there is a misunderstanding with a wrestler at an event. And Raja Jackson was permitted by the wrestling company to go into the ring during this guy's match and get payback. And then when he did, he literally beat the brakes off of him. There was like 22 or 23 completely unanswered shots to an unconscious man laying on the ground. Thought about playing it, but it's not really important here. It's all over the internet. You can definitely find that. But that's what this guy was upset over. So that's what he was responding to. We'll finish off their little bit here. The affidavit points out that Jackson, son of UFC icon Quentin Jackson, is a black male. The pro wrestler in the receiving end of the pummeling Stewart Psycho Stu Smith is white. Diesky, who is not accused of any wrongdoing, that's the YouTuber, did not respond on Tuesday to a request for comment. Now, obviously, this guy's insane. His name, one more time, Zachary Charles Newell. The dude's 25, and he looks way older than I do. That's crazy, dude. Um, Now, I wanted to talk about this a little bit because not only is this fucking crazy, excuse my language, I'll definitely edit that out. This is crazy. It's in our state. But what's even crazier is the background of this. Nobody reported this comment. This was all done in house. I'm not sure if, AI first, but eventually this was picked up by the Google cybercrime team, and they forwarded this tip to the FBI. And it seems like in less than 24 hours, the FBI was on that and took care of that. So let's go Cash Patel and the boys. That's a big W there. But what a crazy dude here. I mean, who insane to even say that shit on YouTube. I mean, and hopefully this guy doesn't actually have real desires to do something like that. Pretty insane. You gotta chill, Oscar. We ain't not yet. I got papers over here. Kit Kat. Oh. Yeah, we got a lot of paper over here. Lots of stuff to get into. So that was that. Next. This is important. Now, these bills were all vetoed by Josh Stein in July, and they're on the calendar now, as you see, for the 22nd this month. I've got the bills here. I'm not going to read them to you verbatim, but just going to kind of cover what we're looking at and what they're about. And you'll see this is insane. We'll also get to the comment that Josh Stein made on all four of these bills and why he vetoed them. But you'll see that he's just not. He's missing. He's not where we are. I'll say it like that. So this Senate Bill 558, again, all four of these are on calendar for the 22nd. This is an act to demonstrate the General Assembly's intent that students, professors, administrators, and other employees of public institutions of higher education recognize the equality and rights of all persons and to prohibit public institutions of higher education from promoting certain concepts that are contrary to that intent. Crazy that this has to be written into a bill, first of all. Even crazier that this was vetoed. Now, the one part I want to focus on, because this is kind of a rolling theme in all of these bills here. Go to divisive concept, and they're going to define this, okay? Now, so divisive concepts is any of the following. One race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. An individual, solely by virtue of his or her race or sex, is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. An individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his or her race or sex. An individual's moral character is necessarily determined by his or her race or sex. An individual, solely by virtue of his or her race or sex, bears responsibility for actions committed in the past by other members of the same race and sex. Now, I won't read this thing because you see, it goes on for a hot minute. We read like the first 5 letters there, rather. But this is so common sense, it's painful. And I don't know why this was like an issue for Stein. Well, I do, but we'll see how he gets out of that one. That was 558. 227 here. An act to demonstrate the General Assembly's intent that students, teachers, administrators, and other school employees recognize the equality and rights of all persons and to prohibit public school units from promoting certain concepts that are contrary to that intent. Now, this was not only discriminatory practices, but this is just letting people have their own dignity and choice about what stuff they do or don't want to be included in, like gender stuff, which really, really has no business in school at whatsoever, in my opinion. And then House Bill 805, an act to officially recognize two sexes in North Carolina to prevent the sexual exploitation of women and minors. to limit the use of state funding, to modify the law related to birth certificates, to modify the law related to civil remedies for gender transition procedures on non-minors, to allow students with religious objections to be excused from certain classroom discussions or activities, and to allow parent access to library books, and to provide for restrictions on school sleeping quarters. Again, this is common sense. But this was vetoed again by Stein. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it's your job to be informed. And these things happen quick. So it's easy to miss some of these things. But here we are together on this. So it's time to now reach out to your representatives and let them know where you stand on this. We have to apply appropriate pressure on this. Now, this goes to, again, defining that there are only two sexes, which there are, male and female. And it goes into the government will not pay for gender affirming care, and that stuff doesn't need to be pushed. I mean, it goes on for a bit. This is one of the longer ones out of all of it. And it even gives some protection to people who might have been exploited when they were younger by pornographic images being uploaded to the internet. So this had all kinds of safeguards, literally, for women and children in it. Super common sense. Again, this is an important one. There it is. Yeah. Well, yes. That's an important one. Make sure you check that one out because this one's a kind of a longer one, so I don't want to bore you with the minutia of it all, if you will. But look into that one again on the calendar. And then last on the calendar that I just want to raise some awareness to, this is House Bill 171. And this is an act eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, initiatives in state and local government and clarifying the penalty provisions of the State Budget Act and Local Government Budget and Fiscal Control Act. Again, common sense. It's this bill here was to remove DEI. And I have been against DEI basically since day one for really all kinds of reasons. But a reason that is pretty universal that I think most people could understand, whether you're white, black, or anything else. What DEI says to a group, a minority group, if you will, is that you cannot do it by yourself. The area you live in is so structured against you, and everybody is so racist, and you also have no independence that you cannot do these things on your own. You can't get a job, you can't be successful, get licensed, any of that, because the area you live in is so shit. And what DEI says, without saying it, is that the minorities cannot do it by themselves as well. And that's what I try to tell people. Whether you're white, black, or brown, is DEI, in my opinion, is just Jim Crow era stuff redressed and renamed. And it's even getting worse now with the influx of the H-1Bs, and you got the HB 67 coming in. And again, we've got the connection on that on the Blue Cross Blue Shield side of that. This is actually a whole bunch of bills I have here on the back that Blue Cross has kind of been having set up for the last 5-6 years to get this underway. And they've made partnerships back, almost, well, definitely over a decade ago now. And I believe through these partnerships, these are where the foreign physicians are going to come into rural areas, but not to skip around. But again, just raising awareness on these. I put the bills on the screen. You can search these up yourself and check them out. I just, again, wanted to lightly touch on those. And I think it's quite an important subject, especially if you have children, man. Because I really, truly do worry what stuff's going to be like for my children who are young right now. I only have one that's even in school right now. But DEI is not on the side of somebody who has my skin tone. That's not the only reason I want to get rid of it. I just think it makes society nasty as a whole. And for people to just forget, and we won't get into the conspiracy side of Martin Luther King or anything, because those have been declassified. But what I will say on is he did have a beautiful thing to say in regards to his children. Is he hopes that one day that they can be judged on the content of their character and not by the color of their skin. And we lost that, and we're back to it, and it hasn't done any good. Zero. And I really don't understand why. Again, Stein has a statement on this, and I'll read it, but this is common sense, and I don't understand why there wasn't more pressure on these bills the first time. I know he vetoed them, so I'm being hopeful here. My mind's blown on these, but I will read his statement real quick. Stein made the following statement on his vetoes of Senate Bill 558, 227, House Bill 171, and House Bill 805. At a time when teachers, law enforcement, and state employees need pay raises and people need shorter lines at the DMV, the legislature failed to pass a budget and instead wants to distract us by stoking culture wars that further divide us. This mean-spirited bill, rather, he says these mean-spirited bills would marginalize vulnerable people and also undermine the quality of public services and public education. Therefore, I am vetoing them. I stand ready to work with the legislature when it gets serious about protecting people and addressing North Carolinians' pressing concerns. Out of touch, dude. Out of touch. Mean-spirited. Protecting children and vulnerable women. Mean-spirited. Judging people based on their merit and the content of their character. Mean-spirited. And getting shorter lines at the DMV is obviously more important than all of that. Absolutely insane work from Josh Stein. But moving on, this is, again, as it says right there, international attention, deafening media silence. I did see reports of one news station covering this that was in America. They covered it for about 40 seconds. Not a whole lot. Other than that, complete media silence. And we have found so much. Shout out to a few people on Twitter. I wish I would have wrote your guys' names down. Shucklefords. Let me see if I can find this one name real quick, because somebody found 3 different GoFundMe pages attached to Irania here. I won't do all that searching. But you know who you are. Fantastic finds on that. It's just weird getting to the bottom of this. I did find and reach out to Eugenia Rush. She has an Instagram. I reached out to her and I asked, who she is and who Frank Haskell is in relation to the victim here. And she did respond back, and she said Rush, is just a really close family friend, and that Haskell is the uncle to the victim. I asked if she'd be willing to maybe do an interview or give some additional comments on what's going on. She refused. Well, never mind. She didn't refuse, but she has not got back to me yet on that. Now, what I meant to say, though, after that is if you watch the tape of the attack, which I'm not going to play here, but you can definitely find it on the internet, which, side note, good on them for releasing something, but at the same time, that almost did more harm than good, releasing that train footage the way that they did by not letting people see the raw reality of the attack. I really feel like that has a bad impact on this whole case as it pertains to just like national awareness of the problems that we have in this country, which in no particular order is lawlessness, homelessness, rampant drug use, And the mayor of Charlotte finally made a comment on this case, and she's basically saying that you can't be mad at DeCarlos because of the situations that are around everything, and we really have to look out for our homeless community, our homeless communities, and those who are struggling with addiction. What a total cop out! Really, the only person who's even politically said anything about this so far that I've seen was Pat McCrory, and it was pretty succinct, actually. Not to say actually like he can't. He had some really good points, and it was mainly they don't need more special police forces down there, as in like transit police and whatnot. They need Charlotte and Mecklenburg to do their job, and they need to stop the small crimes. He didn't say this, but it basically goes to the small window theory, or the broken window, if you will, the small broken window theory. Rather, you see a small break in it, and it's the little problems that lead to the big. And Brown didn't pay for the bus ticket. And I've seen one source, and I've been trying to find it all day, and I cannot find it again. So you can take this for what it's worth. But the bus driver who drove the bus that Brown rode on to go to the light rail said that they didn't confront Brown because they just didn't want a problem. So they didn't want a problem, and they let him ride the train for free. And then he gets on the light rail, no ticket, rides for free. And then, of course, does what he did. Now, I'll probably add this in post. So there is a video of Trump, and I'm just going to say I'll play it now. And we're back. So Trump, we should expect today sometime, is going to make a statement on this stabbing. He supposedly hasn't heard anything about it yet. But hey, at least we're going to get a statement from the prez. Let's go POTUS. Now, something else that's a big W here. This comes from Congressman Randy Fine. Earlier today, he says, I'm going to introduce legislation to hold judges accountable when violent repeat offenders they release commit new crimes. It's easy to release criminals when you're protected by an armed bailiff at all times. The rest of us aren't so lucky. Those 12 judges that released DeCarlos Brown Jr. should have their day in court too. That's a fine W. That's a big, big fine W right there. That's solid. I agree with that. And then this comes from Right Angle News Network. The judge who was the last judge to release Brown from custody was a judge by the name of Teresa Stokes. And she also works at Second Chance Services in Charlotte, which is a mental health facility. How ironic. What a coincidence. Now, I'm not saying that was the same one that he applied to or tried to get into or anything, but what a coincidence. So it's just, really waiting to see what Trump says about this. Because this is interesting, and the media silence has been pretty wild. And I subscribe to, we literally all want to have a good life. Some people more than others, and some people are lost causes. But that's not, I feel like it's not my place to decide, who's worth life or not. And I hate to say some just cheesy shit, but it'd be beautiful if the world could just get along for a little bit, man. Shit's crazy. But we've been on top of this story here basically since it happened, so we'll stay up to date on this, and if there's any new details, we'll definitely look into those. But really nothing as of late. I did want to say there was one other thing which I thought was quite a neat idea, if you will. Let me get to this. This was a walk that might be getting organized. Excuse me. Yeah, so this comes from Cedar Posts. He says, I invited Secretary Duffy to come to Charlotte and walk the last mile of Aranya Zartuska's life and ride the blue line into South End. He also invited the man who broke the story first, Joe Bruno from WSOC 9, to go. Bruno said he would, and now we're just waiting to see if others join. And I commented on the post by this guy, and I was like, man, this could really be a call to action. You know, you could get numbers out there. Little mile walk in sub 80-degree weather. That ain't nothing, dude. But it could definitely, you got to speak about it at some point in time. But just a crazy, crazy event here. Definitely hoping to speak with Eugenia Rush on this situation and just find out more. One last thing I wanted to say about this, because, you know, we have found some weird oddities with this. In the security camera footage, Urania is wearing what looks to be like an employee uniform, and she is, and it's to a company, and that company is a pizzeria based out of Charlotte. Now, that company out of Charlotte hasn't said anything about having an employee pass, you know, their condolences, nothing, zero. There's nothing about it on any of their socials. Weird. Oh boy. All right. The mini expose on Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now, so I can go ahead and close these tabs down. I'll just kind of touch on some points that they make themselves on their website. Let me get to the right tab here. Okay, so they start with a Blue Cross Blue Shield Association is a national association of 33 independent, community-based, and locally operated BCBS companies. Now, the reason I stopped on 33, it's literally more than 33. But for some reason that they choose to put that 33 there. Continuing, the association owns and manages the BCBS trademarks and names in more than 170 countries around the world. The association also grants licenses to independent companies to use the trademarks and names in exclusive geographic areas. 170 countries, Blue Cross Blue Shield in some way, shape, or form operates. Now, Blue Cross Blue Shield kind of has a unique setup. If I were to describe Blue Cross Blue Shield after doing what research I have on them, best comparison is like a 36 head Hydra. And it's crazy. I mean, it's just literally, it's very deep. So it's, you know, where to start. We could literally just start at the beginning. Totally could do that. But what I will do first, I'll just kind of read a few bills that have kind of structured Blue Cross and Blue Shield to be in the position that they are right now. So there's a bill back in 21. It's called SB 462. This reduced con laws. And what this was this gave Blue Cross and Blue Shield the ability to replace equipment and purchase new equipment at lower thresholds. And then HB 76 was signed in 2023, and this exempted psychiatric and rehabs from con requirements. So there's a whole bunch of steps that they would have to go through to update equipment, and here they just take it away for psychiatric and rehab facilities. Again, in 2023, HB 346, BCBS creates a parent nonprofit to hold their assets called Curacor. In 2004, they had made their FastMed acquisitions. I wrote that kind of weird out of spot there. NCFirst in 2004, they expanded their list of codes and services requiring prior authorization, which increased Blue Cross Blue Shield's ability to accept or deny further cases. In 2005, there was HB 67, which we've covered. That brings doctors from foreign countries into rural areas. And then HB 763, which is also recent, this brings doctors from other states. And that's very recent. And man, where to get started with these guys? We'll just start it basically at the beginning. But what I'll probably say this a few times. The ownership and executive structure of the association is like very confusing by nature, and they have partnerships with basically the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Europe and India. And they're connected, man. This is a global 36 head hydra that's controlling medicine across the world. And in most states and just countries, period, Blue Cross usually has majority of the market. So when you have, in their case, more than one, you have an oligopoly. And that's what we have here. And then again, so doing the deep dive on Blue Cross, this has been going on for almost a decade. Now you'll find some interesting stuff in the beginning here where they were basically just set up carte blanche to do whatever they wanted to do with this. So I don't have anything for on screen because PowerPoint didn't work out like that. But I'll probably have the little thing that I made on Twitter. You can check it out there. I'll probably put on the YouTube community thing too. Now, this is going to just be more or less a history run on Blue Cross Blue Shield, tying in with some key important canon moments, if you will, just for lack of better terms. But we're going to be going from the 1930s to today, basically. So to understand where and how Blue Cross Blue Shield even came to be, you've got to understand that before 1930, we had the recession growing into the Great Depression. And during these times, hospitals were having a very high amount of patients not paying for care. So what was called the Baker Plan, and this was started in California and it eventually moved its way through, was it first started with teachers, and it was teachers would each pay 50 cents and it would cover them for 21 days of whatever they needed medically. And this was a system that basically everybody helps everybody. Okay. So all the teachers in the area would pay this in, and if they didn't have to use it, but somebody else did, then, well, the money that everybody was putting in can help pay for that. And God forbid somebody else needs something. Well, they've all thrown in and they're all helping each other. So I've got Blue Cross Plan, essentially California's Baylor Plan, 1933. These were prepaid insurance plans, a mutually beneficial American Hospital Association system. By 1938, Blue Cross Association is formalized, and they're already covering 6 million people. And they were established as a 501c4 social welfare organization. However, service to rural or minority areas were sidelined. $50 million saved on tax exemption reinvested into expansions. This comes from IRS audits from 1940. And you can see straight out of the gate that Blue Cross Blue Shield never really cared about the rural communities or the minority communities. And it's still going on today with all HB 67. Now, 1940s, they seen the rise of the USR fees. 1939, though, back up, CPS founded a nonprofit physician-sponsored plan to cover surgical and medical expenses. This was known as Blue Shield. So you had the Blue Cross plan, which was basically a mutually beneficial insurance plan. And then you have the Blue Shield Commission, and this covered surgical and medical expenses. Now, later in the 40s, wage freezes from World War II legislation allowed companies to offer medical benefits. And this was huge for Blue Cross Blue Shield. Well, Blue Shield at this point in time. This allowed companies to offer the benefits to employees and military personnel. Insured numbers rose from 15 million in 1940 to over 50 million by 1945. And then in 1945, get this, it's pretty wild. The McCarran-Ferguson Act granted antitrust immunity to Blue Cross and Blue Shield, plus a few others. And then another big thing that they had going on towards the tail end of the 70s were discriminatory practices that were being exposed, if you will, mainly in Texas. But just to back up a little bit, in 1945, they were given antitrust immunity. So really, like this system that they know how to exploit, like $1 trillion business, you know what I mean, has been going on since really 1945, with some sweet legislation passed for them that wasn't removed until the 80s, really, and it wasn't even fully removed. But continuing the 40s, in 1947, Texas Blue Cross excludes black hospitals from the network, drawing NAACP lawsuits. And in 47, a BC internal memo admitted to geographic exclusions. Additionally, using USR fees to ensure docs earned 20 to 30% above market rates. And by 1948, reserves had hit $200 million. And then just 1 year later, by 1949, their reserves were around $1 billion in 1949. Insane, dude. 1950s with 1950, the $1 billion in reserves from 49, but by the 1950, they controlled 80% of the commercial market while raising premiums by 15%. And this is something that when you get the global scale here and the players that are involved, and this was in the 50s they were doing this, but they still do this today. When you have everybody involved, when you say turn it up 5%, you turn it up and everybody wins who's on the back end of this. The patients suffer 100%. But they faced lawsuits from the NAACP for practices carrying over from the 1940s. And around 1955, Eisenhower's federal employee health benefits program, was endorsed by Blue Cross and Blue Shield commissions. They were not one entity at this time. So in 1959, the FEHBP Act is established and begins in 1960. In 1960, the Federal Employee Health Benefit Program officially began cementing the Fed's and what would have become BCBSA's lucrative partnership. At this time, in closed-door meetings, the first pieces to the creation of BCBSA are getting put into place, and by 1965, Medicare and Medicaid programs were undertaken, leading to processing up to 40% of claims near the end of the 1960s just for Blue Cross Blue Shield. So they're just eating the market up. And there's so much to get into as far as numbers and stuff, but I'm really just trying to scratch the surface here. So in the 1970s, the DOJ probe finds 90% of hospitals held most favored nation clauses, which led to price inflation for some. And by 1973, the HMO Act is passed. BCBS expands into managed care. By 77, the Department of Justice's antitrust lawsuit versus Blue Cross wouldn't settle for another 7 years, but it started in 77. And again, at the end of 79, Blue Cross Blue Shield, even with litigation from the Department of Justice going on, we're still controlling over 40% of just the Medicare policies in the country. Eating it up. Let me get my mouse to work here. In the 1980s, BCBS is currently covering 80% of the market. Conclusion of the Department of Justice lawsuit in 84 happened. This brings coverage down to 60%, which wasn't much though. GAO audits found $500 million in Medicare overpayments, and at this time raised $500 million from stock prices via WellPoint. This is at the same time. Now, this is when WellPoint is Blue Cross Blue Shield turning the California leg of their operation to a for-profit operation. And this is really how the association operates. It's almost like a franchisee thing. It's it's deep. I'm still trying to fully comprehend it, but I feel like I got a good read on it. But anyways, in 1982, Blue Cross and Blue Shield officially merge. This creates the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association and merges over 75 plans. In 86, the Blue Card program allows members coverage nationwide. However, they were raising prices through the 80s at an annual inflation rate of 12%. So again, they were, I won't say extorting a system, but they were definitely abusing a system. And when it's all closed in, in the network, in the association, they have carte blanche with it. And this was 40 years ago. It is next level now. Now in the 80s though, I feel like the late 80s and 90s is really where Blue Cross Blue Shield took the next step into like really not caring at all other than profit, profit, profit. So reports of Gore-Tex dialysis filters used on Chinese prisoners of war from companies connected to Blue Cross Blue Shield came out in the 80s and, accused of prioritizing profits over affordability has kind of been a mainstay jab at Blue Cross Blue Shield for basically their entire existence. But by 1985, there was $1.2 billion in deficits across all their plans, which also saw rates increased by as much as 15% higher for rural areas versus urban areas to try to offset that. And again, there's just one other tiny little instance of the rural area just getting the worst end of the stick. Now, by the 1990s, 18 of the 33 plans have now gone corporate, having $20 billion floated from reserves to shareholders throughout the early 90s. 1998 seen a class action begin over patients paying an extra 30% in overcharges. This class action lawsuit that was started in 1998 doesn't finish until 2023. Declassified documents show Blue Cross Blue Shield has been overcharging and overpaying doctors since the 1930s. This is from an internal memo, by the way. I spent $15 million to lobby against Hillary Care, which never heard of it. I was just a wee baby. So it's interesting, though. Hillary Care was a flop, and then we got Obamacare. Funny how that works. But a Hillary Care was supposed to be universal health care. But Blue Cross Blue Shield lobbied against that, spending $15 million throughout the 90s to ensure that didn't happen. In 1995, California audit showed that only 40% of $300 million of community funds were spent correctly. And what they mean by that is only 40% of that was spent on like patient enrichment. The rest was CEO pay and upgrades. HIPAA by 1996 aims to protect patient data. Same year, BCBS California converted to for-profit, which we just mentioned that. Then a little note on the from 2000 to today, which this section takes up a whole lot of room, and this isn't really the whole story here, but just again, you're getting some pieces, just some looks into these guys. Since 2000, Blue Cross Blue Shield Association has faced over 100 different lawsuits, paying out billions and billions of dollars. They spent over $100 million in political spending, i.e. lobbying. 2023 DOJ antitrust settlement for $2.67 billion. And then in 2024, they had to turn right back around and pay $2.8 billion. Well, rather, were ordered to pay $2.8 billion in another class action lawsuit. Earlier in the 2000s, the 2002 report showed that the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association inflated reserves by $2 billion to fund litigation, not patient care. So again, they were just making the patients foot the bill. And they're almost like a mini Ponzi scheme on themselves here. By 2003, though, they had paid $2.3 to $2.5 billion in lawsuits and awarded, as I guess is like a bonus, they were awarded the Medicare Part D project. That was $20 billion in profits. ACA passed in 2010, 2015, seeing the Anaheim data hack and exposed 78 million records. So I wanted to bring that point up just to kind of show that there was, data is something to think about. I don't know if I'll read all these notes to you, but this was just additional notes I had at the bottom. But for like expanding partners and other healthcare ventures that they work with, it's over 500 ACOs, including the Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, UPMC, American Hospital Association, American Medical Association ties since 1930s, influenced coverage policies, rejecting 25% of nutrition claims. And then another thing here, which I didn't get to write all these down because this is one of those things where if you just never do it, you're never going to get done. You're never going to talk about it. But Blue Cross Blue Shield across all of their, we'll just say legs, all of their partners, uses a lot of AI to determine who will get coverage and who won't get coverage. And that has been the center of a bunch of lawsuits. But I really feel like that's truly only going to get worse. I really want to see if I could find this really quickly, because I had a solid list of who these guys worked with. I'd love to share it with you. Just looking real quick if I can't find it. One more second. Gotta organize my notes better. Like I put all this stuff together, I printed it out, and then I'm missing like a couple pages. But it's okay. Essentially what I was wanting to get at though is there's you might see on the picture down there called Bupa or Buppa. That's like basically the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Europe. They cover Europe, Asian countries, Australia. They're in a lot of places. And they are the partnership that started in 2014 that gives Blue Cross global access. And my main concern, which I'll be honest with you, I honestly don't think there's anything to do that we can do about this. You're not going to break this up. There's been lawsuits thrown at them about antitrust violations, and they barely pay that stuff back. And you got to understand that though it sounds like a lot of money, a few $billions to the multitudes of trillions of dollars that this association makes, it's a drop in a bucket, and they will do whatever they want to do because they definitely have the bankroll to do it. Now, just to kind of touch on some 10 things here, and I'll actually make a response to something that Nick Fuentes said. This clip's kind of been making its way on Twitter, which I fully don't expect him to see this or anything, but he really took a shit on people who don't fully trust the medical industrial complex. And that really blew my mind. Like, I'm not going to lie. But just want to kind of tap on some things here about Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we'll just say BCBS, okay? I mentioned this earlier. They have market dominance in almost every state, country, and territory that they operate in. How they avoid these antitrust laws, if you will, and monopolies, being accused of that in states, is everything's just run by a different leg of this. What I'm getting at, though, is you'll have one company that might cover Oregon, Washington, and California. But then in the same state, you'll have a Blue Cross partner that only covers each one of those states. So, like, technically, they have 2 or 3 partners or legs operating in a state where those 3 together control 60 to 80% of the insured market. But since it's 3 different companies who are really like leasing the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association tag, they somehow like circumvent that. Pretty crazy. I don't have my notes are shit great, I guess. That's my bad. Totally my fault. But I don't have the companies written down. But if you're interested in it, I do have hella notes on the computer on this. It's just I don't have them printed out right here in front of me. And it's maybe not the most important part of this. But if you do want to know the names of companies and whatnot, let me know and I'll definitely put something together or we'll touch on it again. Because not all Blue Cross Blue Shield companies in America are even called Blue Cross Blue Shield whatsoever. So you never know, man. But so just some things to think about though. There has been a systemic overbilling fraud aspect of Blue Cross Blue Shield basically since the very beginning. And that will always go on. And then when you've got Blue Cross Blue Shield operating on the global scale as they are, I mean, it's just literally just like total exploitation. Now, through the BUPA or whatever, this hospital or health insurance provider rather has a 49% stake where Blue Cross Blue Shield has a 51% stake in the company in India, and it's called like but they own this hospital in India, and I promise you that is where the HB67 talent is going to come from. I just have a big feeling. And that's really my whole thing there on this mini expose of Blue Cross Blue Shield. Admittedly, it's not really my best work because this thing is it's just so much. I mean, I could literally probably make like a 4 or 5 part thing on just Blue Cross Blue Shield and getting into the people connected to these guys, the revolving door with White House and other health insurance providers, and that's the thing is just because you have other guys like Humana, for example, the people who operate on the boards of these companies who are behind the association were also on the board for Humana. A lot of these people come out of the White House too. Massive, massive, massive collusion. And the reason why it won't ever be broke up is just because it's, they're just in too deep. But I will say it was really wild just kind of looking into Blue Cross Blue Shield. So I was really just kind of wanting to understand like why the HB67, And when I started looking into the HB67, I was just looking into, what bills in the past led to this and that. And then, next thing I know, I'm looking at Blue Cross Blue Shield Inception in California. So there we go. But hopefully you got what I was getting at with that, because I will like, I can admit this wasn't the best presentation for this, and I really wanted to work on it a lot longer. But I knew if I didn't put this out, like it would never get out, because I'm talking like I got pages and pages, like pages. There's so much that went into this, and it's, what I'm saying, it was it's still not even done. But I really am still working on, and I'm probably going to do like a chart or a graph or something that makes it really just easily to digest, or makes it easily digestible rather. on just the global connections that there are with Blue Cross Blue Shield and the other companies, and like basically what reach this even gives them. Because I will tell you this too. I kind of feel like AI systems are programmed to protect this stuff about the hospital. Because last time I looked, we don't have we have around 380 million people last time I looked in this country. So 50% of that is 190. Blue Cross, Blue Shield, and all of their conglomerates cover 195 people in America. That is over 50%. Oligopoly. I'm just saying. Because they name the price, they name the rate, they say what is covered, what isn't covered, what can be. They make the decision, and like everything that's connected to it too. They aren't just the one insurance. They are literally everything attached to it in some type of way. Again, 36 head Hydra. They're a monster. And if we can get into it later this week or through the week, I'll definitely touch on it again. I'd love to really, really do this some justice, because it is important that we understand truly about Blue Cross Blue Shield. Because, like I said, man, talking to a few people this weekend about it, people didn't know that Blue Cross Blue Shield operated in other states, let alone in other countries, let alone 170 other countries. And they do. And North Carolina is like, they have no loyalty to this state. So again, this is not medical advice by no means, but for myself, private practice is where I'm looking. Just after everything I've been looking into here, just I'm not down with globalization. And this is, in my opinion, what Blue Cross Blue Shield represents is, this is just the American leg of the globalization leg of completely owning the medicine sector. We got to break away from these systems. Now, I'm not going to spurg out and say like doctors don't know anything, and if all this extra shit. I'm not going to say that. I do believe that doctors, especially tenured doctors who have been doing it for a long time, they do know stuff. But just because somebody has a title of doctor doesn't automatically mean that they are God incarnate, and what they say is 100% fact. And people can be wrong on all kinds of stuff. That's why it's important to have, you know, multiple consultations with other doctors, get more voices in there. And this kind of is leaning into like the Nick Fuentes response, where he like spurged out and basically just took a shit on anybody who even remotely questions the medical industrial complex. And like I've been talking to you for like 20 minutes on this. This is literally on a global scale. And all they have to do is just get into a room and say, let's do this. Let's raise this rate, bap. And it will happen on a global level. And they can basically just write themselves a blank check for whatever. And it's their choice to say what medicines can be allowed in the hospital, what's not, what operations they're going to cover, what they won't cover. And then they leave acceptance and denials up to AI systems anyway. So my response to Nick Fuentes is, if you think the government is corrupt to the core, why would the medical industrial complex that has a revolving door with the same government not be corrupt, or even have just some small pieces in it that are absolutely corrupt? So I don't know if that is, exposing himself as, I'd hate to say like being big medicine or whatever, because it's crazy talk. It's crazy talk. And I know that his parents are going through some medical stuff, and I was given benefit of the doubt on the statement anyway. He's gone so hard on one subject for such a long time that he's probably never looked up to just I can get a breath of fresh air and just look into anything else. So he just doesn't. And I'm giving him benefit of the doubt, and he doesn't understand fully the and neither do I. You know what I'm saying? I'm not being arrogant or pompous to think that I fully understand the medical industrial complex. But what I am saying is that I can clearly see where a conspiracy can happen and how easy it is. And then how obvious it is with this. Again, I'll probably end up doing like a graph to just put these companies on paper so you can see with like ownership percentages, how many people they cover, what they do, what this leg does, what that leg does. They literally have it all covered. I'm talking every aspect of everything to do with the calling a doctor's office, getting checked out, getting medicine, getting surgery, going to a hospital, what you can and can't do. I mean, they have the sole discretion and there is essentially no oversight on that. They have carte blanche to do whatever they want to. And then for people like Nick Fuentes to really just kind of totally gaff at the thought that maybe there is some bad with the medical industrial complex blows my mind. But I was going to end it, but one other thing, because I had seen a few people had mentioned this where they were thinking that this was rumors. This is on the Senate race, so I'll just let me put this here. Just a quick update on the GOP side of things. This comes out September 5th, so just a few days ago from NBC News. This is by Ben Commissar, Matt Dixon, Henry Gomez. It says the RNC has greenlit early party aid for Michael Whatley as he campaigns for an open battleground Senate seat in North Carolina, giving the former National Party chair access to help that's rarely granted to non-incumbents who have yet to win their primaries. National Party rules require the RNC to stay neutral in any primary unless the filing deadline for the office is passed and the candidate is unopposed. But the rules do contain an exception. The RNC can contribute money or in kind aid to any candidate with the blessing of three of the state's RNC members. Rather, with the blessing of all three of the state's RNC members. They missed some words there. North Carolina GOP Chair Jason Simmons confirmed to NBC News Thursday that he and the party's state committeemen and committee women have agreed to approve the move known as Rule 11 of the RNC bylaws. Simmons says the RNC has reached out and inquired about Rule 11 and it has been engaged. He noted that while the rule allows for the RNC to now engage in the race, the state-level Republican Party will continue to focus on the general election. I just clicked off the paragraph. Nice. As opposed to focusing on primary politics, but Simmons said the importance of the race is one of Senate Republicans' most vulnerable seats in the 2026 midterm elections. Scroll down just a little bit more. He says, because Michael Whatley is a Trump-endorsed candidate, we wanted to go ahead and do this, he said. The move adds more weight to the already hefty influence the National Republican Party has in individual elections around the country. Trump's valued endorsement, of course, is the single biggest factor. So for those who are wondering if the RNC is fully behind Whatley, if they're deciding to go with Whatley, from the sounds of it, yes, they are. And I don't. My biggest concern with Whatley is he has no campaign website. On LinkedIn, his address is Washington, D.C. This is literally a Washington, D.C. swamp creature. And I feel like him not having a website is just one indicator that he believes he is an automatic shoo-in for this position. And to me, it almost feels like the GOP is giving a volley lobby to Cooper and the Democrats. I mean, this is a terrible call. I feel like personally, I really feel like the best choice was Andy Nielsen. And I don't know if he was talked out or I don't know what the reason was behind it. I never got any reason on that. But that was a like a real heavy blow here, and then I feel like the RNC just automatically just going with Whatley here. I don't know what they not like in Brown or what the issue is there, but it's seemingly going to be Whatley versus Cooper. It is very worrisome for me right now because Wally just doesn't seem like that guy to me. But with that being said, that is episode 3. Big shout out to everybody who shared the last video. Absolute legends. Thank you for following Twitter. Hopefully we grow a whole bunch. Again, this anonymous tip line has been here the whole time. If you want to shine a light on anything in North Carolina, national or international, it's truly totally anonymous. So you could drop that there and I'll just receive your message. And if you want people to know about it, I'll speak on it. Again, beholden to nobody. So we can talk about, say, whatever we want. But on that note, thank you. Have a great night or day, depending on when you watch this. And see you next time.